Today on Locked On Canadiens, everything you need to know as the Canadiens begin their playoff series tonight.
You're Locked On Canadiens, your daily podcast on the Montreal Canadiens, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi there, everyone, and welcome to a very special episode of Locked On Canadiens. My name is Laura Saba, also known as the Active Stick, and I'm not joined, as always, by the wonderful Ian Boisvert. He got the night off as I sat down with Dan Holmi of Locked On Capitals to preview this series. We talked storylines, we talked predictions, we talked X factors, we talked everything. And this is going to be your comprehensive preview before the series starts tonight with Game 1. Without further ado, please check out my conversation with Dan.
Hello and welcome into this special crossover edition of Locked On Capitals and Locked On Canadiens, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Dan Holmi of Locked On Capitals, and in today's episode, I have Laura Saba of Locked On Canadiens. Laura, thanks for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. It's just such a great time of the year.
It is my favorite time of year talking hockey, and it all builds up to this, right? You take a look at it, the hard work that was put in, and you take a look at the Canadiens, for example, the last team to clinch a playoff spot. This has to be a really special moment for Canadiens fans, as it's been a while since your team has made it to the playoffs. And, you take a look at the Canadiens, it was a rebuild, or that's what we were told. I don't cover the team as closely as you do, of course, or pay as attention as close as you do, but that was the word out there, that the Canadiens were in the midst of this rebuild. But it seems like that has really taken it to the next level because, hey, you guys are in the playoffs. What are some of the biggest storylines surrounding the Canadiens for us Capitals fans that aren't too familiar with your team?
So you said it, right? It was the last team to make the playoffs. There's supposed to be a rebuild year. Honestly, at the beginning of the year, if you had said the Canadiens will make the playoffs by game 82, people would have laughed at you. Marty said it, and the team said it at the golf tournament. They have an annual golf tournament before the season for charity. And that's usually when they set the tone for the season. There's a lot of media availability. And they got laughed at. And one of the buzzwords really, or the key terms of the season was in the mix. Marty said, we want to be in the mix. Jeff Gorton said, we really want to be in that mix right there. And then you started hearing it. Like even in French, they'd be like, dans le mix. Like it was really... That was the storyline of the season. They wanted to be playing meaningful games in March. Well, here we are in April, and their last game of the season was the most meaningful one. And I don't care. I don't believe them if they say that they expected to be here because I don't think anyone did. So I think the biggest storyline is outperforming expectations. And that has happened throughout the season as well. Now, the Capitals will have seen some not so great Canadiens games in which they would have started really well, but then squandered the game, right? Like there were a lot of comebacks. I believe it was 2 wins to the Capitals, 1 win for the Montreal Canadiens in overtime, over the course of the season. I'm very excited and animated. I'm so excited about the playoffs. Anyway, and so I think, that's part of the storyline too, is the Canadiens can find a way to win. And they have beat Stanley Cup champions, Stanley Cup contenders, teams much better than them, teams much worse than them. And I really think that the thing that I would want Capitals fans to be paying attention to is not the overall record, which doesn't sound very promising, but since the Four Nations, they were one of the hottest teams. In their last 10 games, they went 7-1-2. That's a lot, right? Before the Four Nations, they had a 2% chance of making the playoffs. And here they are that they did, right? And the Four Nations wasn't all that long ago. It was past halfway through the season. So I think it's really, really important to take note of that. On the flip side, there have been a lot of issues with inconsistency. This is an immature and young team. So I think that's one of the biggest things that the Capitals are going to be able to capitalize on, is that inexperience. The power play, not so great. It was really, really unimpressive until Patrick Laine came on board and became the power play, right? And all the goals were his, or almost all of them were his. And then teams started figuring that out. And the power play, all of a sudden, the stats were not that great anymore, right? So I think that those are two of the biggest storylines. There's a little bit of inconsistency with the goaltending, but they're both really solid goaltenders. They're probably going to go with Montembeault. I don't think this is going to be a repeat of, that 2010 where somebody got chased out of the net and someone else went on a miracle run and then got traded in the offseason. I don't think we're going to see a storyline like that. I think the story is going to be more with the young stars and what they end up learning.
Yeah, so as I take a look at the roster of the Canadiens, it's pretty impressive. And the one thing that I noticed is that most of the players on the team are 26 years of age and younger. So if you're a Canadiens fan, this is a really exciting time to be a fan in the regard that these players are young and they're only getting better. I see that Hutson has 60 assists on the season, and we're familiar with his brother that plays within the Capitals organization. But wow, you take a look at it, I think that he has far exceeded expectations. You take a look at Demidov, these kind of guys that your team is definitely one that is going to be reckoned with for years to come. So an exciting time it's got to be a Habs fan. I can kind of almost feel the excitement coming off of you just talking about that team. So definitely a lot to look at there. Now, as far as taking a look at the Capitals here, and what is in store for our team is that, you take a look at it last season, it was a lot like the Canadiens. It was the last team to qualify for a playoff spot. And, this team was facing a rebuild, a retool, semantics at the end of the day, if you ask me. And what happened is Nick Backstrom, he was on the LTIR. TJ Oshie, Kuznetsov was traded out of town, so they had some money. So now they assembled this new team with Pierre-Luc Dubois, Logan Thompson, these kind of guys. And I think they surprised a lot of people that they are in the playoffs, period. But the biggest storyline, I would say, surrounding the Capitals right now is net minding. It's the great net minding of Logan Thompson, that got the Capitals into the position that they're in right now. But the question is he going to be good to go in this playoff series? It could very well be Charlie Lindgren and Clay Stevenson, who played his very first NHL game against the Penguins the other night. So a lot of questions surrounding this team as far as, are they going to be able to do it without Logan Thompson? So that is one of the biggest storylines. The other big storyline, of course, is Alex Ovechkin doing great things as he finally caught and passed Wayne Gretzky. And now we don't need to worry about that anymore. But can we win another cup while Alex Ovechkin is here? One more year left to get it done. So that is the biggest storyline surrounding this team. But for you, what are you looking forward to the most? In game number one, what has you the most excited?
Well, they're playing against one of the top teams in the league, right? For the Montreal Canadiens. This is, to me, every moment is something that they learn. It's something new that they learn. As you mentioned, they're all really young. And I think nobody's really expecting them to go all that far. But what I really want to know is, do they put up a fight? Because the last week of the season, while they tried to clinch, there were a lot of moments that got away from them. And I think this is a really big moment on a really big stage. I'm almost glad that the series is not opening in Montreal, because I think that would have been even bigger. And for me, like, one thing that I do want to see from the Canadiens is, at the very least, I want to see that all of the people you mentioned, Lane Hutson, right? Lane Hutson is capable of controlling the play when he's on the ice, right? You look at that, it's his first year, he's a rookie, but he is phenomenal, right? So I want to see if there are moments. We saw it all throughout the season. The game might not have been going well, but he would be able to take control and sort of lead the team over, right? Nick Suzuki, there's a little bit of suspicion as to whether or not he's fully healthy. I don't like the Canadiens haven't mentioned anything, but it definitely looks like it when you're watching him play. So I'm looking for him to be healthy, right? I want to see, because he brings an intensity, and he and Cole Caulfield are among the veterans of this team, right? They were around with the last playoff run. Brendan Gallagher was around with the last playoff run. David Savard wasn't on this team, but he has a lot of experience. But if you look at most of the rest of the roster, they have zero playoff experience. And so I think the biggest thing is, I want to see how it all comes together, and I want them to actually work on getting better, because I know it's, in the playoffs, it's do or die. And I know that the coaching staff is going to be strategizing within the game just to win that one game. But at the end of the day, I want to see them all step up, and I don't want to see them shrink away like they did in that last week of the season when the clinch seemed very elusive. All they had to do was win games, and they weren't able to do that. So I think for me, I just want to make sure that the moment doesn't get the best of them. I am actually curious. I know we're running out of time in this segment. I'm curious as to how it feels on the Capitals end, because I think this Capitals team is a lot more consistent throughout the lineup when it comes to depth. Whereas in 2010, it was a very top-heavy, offense-heavy team. So what are the differences that you're seeing? Like, are there any ghosts that we need to worry about? Is it just, fan anxiety and normal sports stuff? Or is it something that's just, it's 15 years ago? I think only Alex Ovechkin, with Nicholas Backstrom out of the lineup, I think only Alex Ovechkin was there for that, right? And in Montreal, none of the players were there for that, or the coaching staff. So I'm very curious as to what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I mean, you talked about it. Alex Ovechkin is the only player from that era, and I don't think that the Capitals' current team relates to that too much. I think that it's a new identity. What has been said about this year's team is the vibe surrounding this team, that everyone gets along very well, and part of that, of course, is winning. When you're winning, you get along with everyone. Life is you're on top of the world. But as far as the Capitals, as they prepare to take on the Canadiens, I know that some people look at it with Capitals colored glasses on, and they take a look at the statistics and go, this is going to be a walk in the park. They're probably just going to, they're going to sweep the Canadiens. Now, I've watched the Capitals enough this season to know that sometimes they struggle against teams that aren't quite as good as them. And, I take a look, like I'm talking about your team, about all the talent there, that I think that it is going to be a difficult series, that on paper, sometimes things on paper don't necessarily translate into reality. So I think that the Capitals look at the Canadiens as like this young, scrappy team, and young enough to know that maybe they don't belong there. You know what I mean? Not that they don't belong there, but you know what I mean? That they're up against such a big target like the Capitals. So it's going to be interesting. And, if the one thing I'm going to say about the Capitals is they have to play a 60-minute game. That is one of the Achilles heel. If they let the Canadiens into this game, or say they win one of these games in Washington, that could be a game changer, because once that goes to the Bell Center and that place is going to be live, that is going to be very difficult for the Capitals to gain any footing. So, my big thing here, Capitals, if they can take game 1 and 2 and kind of vacuum up that momentum, that'll be good. But if the Habs, if they find a way to win one of those games in DC, that could be difficult. All right, so coming up here after the break, we'll talk about key players in this series. I'm talking Ovechkin, Wilson, Suzuki, Hutson, these kind of players. Which players are going to make the difference? I'll discuss straight ahead. Scaling your business requires the right expertise at the right time. With Upwork, you can find specialized freelancers in marketing, development, design, and more, experts ready to help you take your business to the next level. Upwork gives business flexibility by connecting with top freelance talent across multiple industries, including IT, AI, web development, and marketing. Whether you need extra hands for a project or a long-term partner, Upwork makes hiring simple and affordable. If you need help with a marketing campaign, Upwork can connect you with a freelance expert who delivered incredible results. Posting a job is free and simple, and within a day, with multiple qualified candidates to choose from. Instead of hiring full-time, Upwork helps find affordable top-tier freelancers to scale my business effectively. Visit Upwork.com right now and post your job for free. That's UPWORK.com, Upwork.com, to connect with top talent and grow your business today. All right, welcome back into this special crossover edition of Locked On Capitals and Locked On Canadiens, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Dan Holmi of Locked On Capitals, and today I am joined by Laura Saba of Locked On Canadiens. So talking about the roster and some elite level players, I think that if you are an NHL fan, some of the names on the Capitals are maybe a little bit more familiar. Alex Ovechkin, Tom Wilson, these kind of names, but there are big names brewing in Montreal. And if you're not familiar, you should probably get familiar because I think they're going to be the names to look at. I'm just taking a look at your top line. This was the first line, at least in the last game. Cole Caulfield, Nick Suzuki, and Slavkovsky. That is quite a lineup that you guys have out there, and a lot of guys, a lot of players on your team in double-digit goals. If you're talking to a Capitals fan here, what players really pop off the page and should the Capitals look out for?
I think absolutely Lane Hutson is the number one. He broke multiple records this year. You mentioned the assists. That's actually, he's tied for the number one in history in the NHL,
Crazy.
right? For a rookie. So he's definitely one of the most dynamic players. He's very interesting to watch. He's very creative. Obviously, Ivan Demidov made the team. And he's playing against one of his heroes, right? Like, imagine being this kid. You've played 2 NHL games, and now you're up against like arguably the greatest hockey player to come out of your country, somebody you probably looked up to. So I think like there's a lot there, and he is so dynamic. He's so creative. We're hoping that Marty gives him more and more minutes as time goes on, because he didn't play a whole lot in the first couple of games. In his very first period of NHL hockey, he had a goal and an assist. So Ivan Demidov expected to start on that second line with Alex Newhook and potentially Patrick Laine. That's somebody to look out for. You really want to look out for, this is really important too, because these are not big names in any way, but they have actually been the anchor of this team this year, is that fourth line of Yoel Armia, Emil Heineman, and Jake Evans. We talk about replacement level players and bottom six and all of that, but there is such a thing as having an elite bottom six and having better bottom six players than opponents. And I think that Yoel Armia, Jake Evans, Emil Heineman together have done a really good job of Marty will start them in games a lot of the time because they'll win the face-off. They'll take up time in the opponent's zone, right? None of them are offensive superstars. Like Emil Heineman has a great shot, but he's never going to be creative like a Demidov or Cole Caulfield or anything like that. But they're very solid. They're one of the top penalty killing units as well. Like when you put them together defensively, they're great. So they're really not the big names, but they're definitely players to watch, because when they're on the ice, they're bothering the opponent. They're stifling the opponent. They're holding Austin Matthews to no goals. They're holding Connor McDavid to no goals, right? Those are the guys that are really, really important to keep an eye out for, because they're going to be the ones giving the Capitals problems. Now, the middle six has a lot of, there's a lot of exciting things, like I said, and there's some unexpected things as well with Patrick Laine, with that incredible offensive ability, but his knee's not fully healed, so he doesn't skate all that well. So I do also want to remind people about Brendan Gallagher, because he's one of the toughest people to play against. I always like to say that Brendan Gallagher is like Brad Marchand, but with better PR. That's what you're getting with Brendan Gallagher, right? And he's one of the people that the team is playing for. He and David Savard, the veterans of this team, like they all have been talking about how they're the heart and soul over the course of this year, and they're really, really playing for them. When you're seeing them on the ice, Brendan Gallagher is like a renaissance man. David Savard, not so much. David Savard, you'll be okay. And then Caden Gooley as well. He's definitely somebody who's had some injury trouble over the course of this season. But he's one of the more reliable defensemen. Mike Matheson, when you see him on the ice, it could go either way. So, it could go really well for the Capitals and not so much for the Canadiens. But really your key players that you want to watch are Ivan Demidov, Lane Hutson, Nick Suzuki, Cole Caulfield, Uri Slavkovsky, as you mentioned, and Patrick Laine on the power play, but hopefully like a little bit more as well. And I think that's pretty much it. There's things to be said about all of them, but if the Canadiens are to win games and if they're to go on a run, it's going to be on the strength of that fourth line plus the stars I just mentioned.
Yeah, so I'm hearing a lot about Demidov and the excitement that surrounds him. I believe I heard a story that he landed in Toronto,
Yes,
and a bunch of fans were waiting for him there, and that had to be kind of a crazy moment for him. Like, wow, they're really hungry to see me on this team. And, preparing for this show, I did quite a bit of research on it, and I've heard rumors out there that there was talk about moving Demidov maybe onto the first or second line in Slavkovsky's spot. And that kind of lit a fire under him. Do you think that they should kind of integrate him more slowly, or do you think that it's the playoffs and, just risk it for the biscuit, if you will?
I think it really depends on how that first game goes, because I feel like your runway is a lot shorter, right? Like when an 82-game season, you can give Slavkovsky chances to do really well, right? But when you have only 4 games to win, and if you lose, like as soon as you lose 4 games, you're out. I think it's more on a like shift to shift or period to period basis. I don't necessarily see Marty breaking up that line all that much just yet, but you never know what might happen if the Canadiens go for a long series or even past the series. I think you do see him push that first line. But right now, I don't think that it's something that he wants to mess around with, because the other thing too is that you need depth, right? So if you have that first line and everybody's line matching with or hard matching that line, then you have that line with Demidov and Patrick Laine on it with Alex Newhook in the middle. You have that as an option to kind of go up against some of the lesser defensive players on the opponent. So I don't see him. I do hope though that he does move Ivan Demidov off of the second power play unit onto the first power play unit, because the first power play unit is really just not clicking. None of it is clicking, but moving him up might really help that.
Yeah, and as far as the Capitals are concerned, the big names to look for is, maybe a name that's not too familiar around the NHL. Maybe if you're an NHL nerd, it is, but Dylan Strome, who is putting up big assists this year and points. And he is that guy that is that first line center, feeding Alex Ovechkin those sweet passes, kind of in Nick Backstrom's absence. So look for him to be a true difference maker. And we were talking about Demidov there, a young talent on the Canadiens, and the Capitals also have a young talent in Ryan Leonard, who has put up 30 goals for Boston College, but not an apples for apples comparison, as there was a lot of hype, like, oh my God, when is Ryan Leonard going to be here? He's here. And, all things considered, he's been okay. He hasn't put up 30 goals. He's put up one empty netter. But all things considered, I think that they're going to need to see a whole lot from him. Of course, the other big player out there is the great eight, Alex Ovechkin, who has put up 44 goals on the season at 39 years old, mind you. And it's interesting that he faced that knee, lower leg fracture against the Utah Hockey Club, and missed a substantial amount of time. And you think to yourself that he would have probably scored 50 goals this season had it not been for that injury. But those are kind of the big names. Tom Wilson, I'll talk about a little bit more in the last segment about if we can lower the boom and bring in the physicality. But a lot of these guys putting up career numbers, Connor McMichael, a young talent, Pierre-Luc Dubois, a bit of a reclamation project from the Kings, has been, just nothing short of amazing on that second line center position. I think he has taken, Connor McMichael's game to the next level. So a lot of exciting forwards, also defenders. Maybe you guys have heard of a player called Xhekaj, a guy that has been absolutely huge as well. John Carlson, these kind of guys that are really good rear guards, but also have an offensive flair. So I think that if this team is, at full capacity, and the hard part with the Capitals right now is that they're out Alexei Protas, who has put up 30 goals this season, and Logan Thompson. So those could be real game changers, especially Logan Thompson. And, Alexei Protas putting up 30 goals. Where's that goal scoring going to come from? But those are the big names to circle for this team. But I'm already getting excited. There's a lot at stake. I think that when the Capitals go into this, they want to not underestimate the young talent on the Canadiens, as maybe the Capitals names are a bit more marquee names, but I think that there's young talent that is brewing in Montreal as well. All right, so coming up here after the break, we'll talk about notable stats, X factors, and who we think is going to win this series. We'll discuss straight ahead. Looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious? Crack into a good source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you 10% of your daily value. Plus, they're packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats to help you keep feeling fuller longer. Now, personally, I love the no shells variety. It's the perfect grab and go snack for busy days, whether I'm snacking at my desk, on a road trip, or just need a quick protein boost. They're always my go-to snack. And if you love cracking open every shell for that satisfying crunch, the in-shell options are a classic favorite. So get snacking and get cracking with a snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more.
This show is also sponsored by Farm to Fork. If you're a fan of premium and locally farmed meats delivered straight to your door, I've got some exciting news. Farm to Fork makes it easy to get high-quality steaks, air-chilled chicken, wild-caught seafood, and more, all with no antibiotics, hormones, or GMOs. Plus, everything comes flash frozen and individually packaged for your convenience. All Farm to Fork meats are raised on Canadian farms, so when you order, you're supporting local producers, especially now as it's time to buy Canadian. Farm to Fork's meats are top notch. I've had some amazing steaks that were tender, juicy, and perfectly cooked. Their chicken is air chilled, so it's fresher and more flavorful than what you're going to get in the store. And the wild caught seafood is a game changer. It's so fresh, it's clean, it's full of flavor, it's so delicious. And Farm to Fork is delivering all across Ontario and Western Quebec. And the best part, delivery is free with a minimum order of $199. You don't even have to leave the house to get this kind of quality. I've got a special code just for you. Use code LOCKEDON40 to get $40 off your first order at Farm to Fork. Visit farmtoforkdelivery.ca to start stocking up on the best meats around. Again, that's LOCKEDON40 for $40 off your first order. Farm to Fork, delicious locally farmed meats delivered straight to your door.
All right, welcome into this special crossover edition of Locked On Capitals and Locked On Canadiens, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Dan Holmi of Locked On Capitals, and today I am joined by Laura Saba of Locked On Canadiens. So talking about notable stats and kind of things to look for in this series as there's a lot of different ways that this can go. The biggest question that I have that I think that the Canadiens need to answer is, can the Canadiens sustain the energy and confidence gained from their playoff clinching victory?
I would say I really hope so. We were a little bit surprised it took them so long to clinch because it took them, it was 4 games that they had the opportunity to, and they only got it after game 5, right? Or at the end of game 5. So I do think that the Canadians, like the moment is something that we do have to worry about, the jitters. Even Martin St. Louis at the end of the series, at the end of the season, he got asked and he said, like this past week, this team has lived multiple seasons. The way that they, their nerves, their energy, and all of that. But they also have a certain set of confidence. Like at the before the trade deadline, Nick Suzuki went to management and said, "Don't break this team up. We're going to show you something." And he put his money where his mouth is, right? That's what the team did. It was incredible. And so, we do want to talk a little bit about some notable stats. For the first time this year, Nick Suzuki became more than point per game player. He hit 89 points, right? He had not hit that before. You've got Cole Caulfield, who people used to make fun of and say that's the greatest 40-goal scorer to never even score 30 goals. He hit 37 this year, right? He was 3 away. You've got Lane Hutson, incredible, right? 66 points, 60 assists, 6 goals. That's one thing. Patrick Laine, too, a bit of a renaissance for him, right? 20 goals in 52 games, 15 of them in the power play. A lot of players hit milestones, like even Samuel Montembeault hit 31 wins. Like he'd never hit 30 before in his career. So there are a lot of notable stats there. And I think one of the biggest things about this is that the Canadiens have proven that they're capable of rising above and beating an opponent that is far better than them. They showed it against Vegas. They showed it against Florida. They swept Florida, the Stanley Cup winning Florida Panthers this season, right? They showed it against Colorado. They've been able to really step up. The question is, can they actually sustain it? And that's the part that we're talking about. You're talking about Capitals playing 60 minutes. The Habs have that problem too. They either start slow or they squander. So like a full consistent effort over 60 minutes, that to me is one of the biggest question marks.
And as far as, players that are putting up big numbers, like I talked about, Tom Wilson putting up 33 goals, that oftentimes he is revered as kind of this goon, this tough guy, that kind of thing. But putting up 33 goals, you don't see a Ryan Reeves or a guy like that putting up those kind of goals that, he is kind of a true Swiss Army knife. And, I think that he got kind of a bad rap earlier in his career when he was suspended, gotten all kinds of fights, and he doesn't necessarily do that. He says that I'm better served on the ice than I am in the penalty box. But, as far as, like I say, big name player stats, I'm talking Protus. that the most goals he had ever scored before was like 6 goals. He put up 30 goals this season.
Incredible.
I think that there's just, things growing by leaps and bounds. Connor McMichael, these kind of guys. So one of the X factors, I guess I'm going to say, or, a possibility would be the physicality of this series. We know that we have Tom Wilson, that there is Duhaime, that there is Dylan McIlrath, if he is in the mix. And, I think to myself that if the Capitals wanted to gain an advantage right out of the gate, it would be to lower the boom, have Alex Ovechkin, Tom Wilson, all these guys just be like a bull in the china shop and kind of soften up targets, almost like a military maneuver. Now, I know that Arber Xhekaj has been out for a while, kind of in the doghouse of the Canadiens, from what I understand, but he is a guy. I think that if it gets out of hand, say for some reason the Capitals take the first 2 games, I don't cover the Canadiens, but if I was the GM or the head coach, I would put him in game number 3 to kind of be like the countermeasure, if you will, because especially if Dylan McIlrath, who is 6'5" and built like a tank, if he's in there, that it could be difficult, I think, for the Canadiens to overcome. I know that there are some other tougher guys on the Canadiens, but how would the Canadiens handle it if the Capitals just lowered the boom and brought the physicality right out of the gate?
So I think it's interesting because without Arber Xhekaj too, yeah, I don't necessarily know if he's in the doghouse. I think it's more that Martin St. Louis just prefers David Savard. And David Savard has that veteran knowledge, right? Like he's got a Stanley Cup under his belt. He's really going to be that elder statesman on this team. But without Arber Xhekaj in the lineup, the games against Toronto and Ottawa over last weekend, I think they really were able to up the physicality. They were throwing the hits. There are some Canadians that are definitely people to watch out for. Slavkovsky, right? He's definitely one of those guys who will slam the body around if necessary, and he's really good at picking his spots now. It used to be earlier in his career, it would just be bull in a china shop kind of thing. And I know those Alex Ovechkin hits. I know they're definitely something to watch out for. Yeah, like Slavkovsky's not a slouch in that department by any means. They've got Jaden Struble, who is a physically gifted specimen. I look at that guy and I'm like, this is the kind of person that I want to work out like, he's fantastic. He's huge. He's tough. He's just so strong. He's definitely one of those. Caden Gooley, despite coming back from a really gruesome injury and being a little bit shaky, but I don't think it's really actually that injury that's slowing him down. I think he's back. He's back to hitting. He's back to slamming guys around. So I think the way that the Canadiens are going to have to respond to it is the guys like Lane Hutson and Cole Caulfield are going to have to be slippery and fast. And the guys like Juraj Slavkovsky, Jaden Struble, that kind of person, even Mike Matheson, right? Like he's known as an offensive defenseman, but he can throw the body when it's necessary. I do see a point where Arber Xhekaj could draw back in the lineup. And it's really interesting that you said he's in the doghouse because a lot of the fans too, like in our comments, will hear like, what does Marty have against Arber Xhekaj? I don't think he has anything against Arber Xhekaj. I think he just loves David Savard. I think that's the thing. It's a love for David Savard. But that's the thing. Like Tom Wilson, I think, is somebody who this year has become, like at the beginning of the year, we used to say this about Arber Xhekaj too. Like you are better served playing as a defenseman and not picking those fights, not going after those heads, not throwing those ill-advised hits, those inopportune, those late hits. And I think that's a testament like to Tom Wilson. Like he's had, I believe this is the greatest season of his career, right? Just toning that down. But that doesn't mean that physicality has gone away, right? So I do think that the Canadiens are prepared for that. I think that's something that they will watch out for. And I also think that part of coaching against Ovechkin is not just containing him on the scoreboard. It's also getting away from that big body hit, which I love seeing. I just don't want to see it against my team.
So, you take a look at other factors. I know we're running out of time here, but we'll go a little bit long here. I'm talking about the net minding. Things could go in a lot of different directions. Like I said, Logan Thompson, say for some reason he's not able to go in this entire series of games. That could spell curtains for the Capitals. I hate to be dramatic here, but I mean, he kind of put the Capitals in the position that they're in right now. And another, a kind of thing to consider as well is the net minding for the Canadiens. Like you said, Sam Montembeault, for example, who, said is a good goaltender, maybe not a great goaltender, even though that he was in the Four Nations face-off, and Logan Thompson wasn't. But
I'm still salty about that too. Don't worry.
that you take a look at it, that net minding, it's something that you don't consider. Usually think to yourself, it's goal scoring, it's defense, something like that. But net minding in and of itself could make it interesting. Briefly weigh in on net minding and what difference you think that could make in this series.
So I think with Samuel Montembeault, he's been really good at clutch saves, but once in a while he lets in a softie and usually one from far away. So if the Capitals have been paying attention, they'll know that that's his weak spot, high to the right side, I believe, and from all the way out on the other side of the ice. But the thing is, he has come up big, and Jakub Dobeš as well. Like he won his first 5 games, I believe. The first one was a shutout against Florida. Like it was crazy. Like he's a really solid backup. The issue that I found with both of these goaltenders is less the net minding. It's more the lack of run support they get, right? And you'll watch, and most of the time you'll be like, this guy had no chance on that. The defensemen were screening him, or this guy lost his man, or it's usually that, or they're not scoring enough goals. Like that game against Carolina, I thought that the last game of the season, I thought it was going to go in that direction. You watch Samuel Montembeault make Carey Price-like saves in the second period, and the team just wasn't scoring. So obviously, once the dam broke, it was a little bit, we could calm down a little bit. But it's really, the net minding is solid, and I think if they have this tandem in net, they're getting slightly above average league goaltending. And if you're a good team, that's all you need. The problem is, are the Canadiens a good team enough at this point?
A lot to consider. It will be a fun series, that is for sure. Listen, Laura, I want to thank you for joining me on this special crossover edition of Locked On Capitals and Locked On Canadiens. Why don't you tell everyone where we can find you online?
Of course. Myself and my co-host Ian Boisvert, we host Locked On Canadiens 5 days a week. The same place you get this podcast, all over YouTube, wherever you listen to your podcasts. We're there. We're free and available every single day. You'll find us all over social media. We're on Blue Sky, TikTok, Instagram, and Gmail at Locked On Canadiens. We want to really encourage you guys to listen to our perspective as well, and we'll be listening to Dan for the Caps perspective all throughout the series.
All right. Once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this special crossover edition of Locked On Capitals, and I'll talk to you again next time.